in the heart of Terran Green's desolate expanse. Among the nomads, a tribe born from survival and shadowed by constant movement, Henry Deeds stood as a figure both respected and feared. Known for his resilience and unyielding spirit, Henry had navigated the wasteland's perils, leading his kin through sandstorms and skirmishes with a steady hand. Yet as the crimson sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire and blood, a different battle raged within him, one that tested not his strength, but the depths of his desperation. Henry's daughter, Elia, lay feverish and frail within the makeshift shelter that served as their home, her breath shallow, her once vibrant eyes dimmed. The sickness that gripped her had swept through the nomad camps like a silent storm, claiming the young and old alike. The healers, with their ancient knowledge and dwindling supplies, could only watch, helpless, as the disease defied every remedy known to them. It was during a clandestine meeting, under the cloak of night, that a glimmer of hope pierced Henry's growing despair. A cloaked figure, a member of the enigmatic Forgotten, had sought him out with whispers of a cure, a medicine hoarded by the Tellurians, guarded within the fortified cities that rose like monoliths against the barren landscape. The risk of venturing into Tellurian territory was great. Tales of their ruthlessness towards trespassers were as common as the sands beneath their feet. Yet the chance to save Elia, to snatch her from the clutches of death, ignited a fierce determination within Henry. Gathering the nomads around the flickering flames of their communal fire, Henry stood, his silhouette etched against the dance of light and shadow. The faces that looked back at him were those of his family, bound not by blood, but by the shared trials of survival. They had followed him through scarcity and danger, trusting in his leadership, his vision for their future. Brothers and sisters, Henry began, his voice steady despite the turmoil that churned within him. We face a foe unlike any other, one that steals the breath from our children, dims the light in their eyes. Our healers are powerless against this sickness, but there is hope yet. The camp was silent, save for the crackling of the fire and the distant howl of the wind, as Henry spoke of the Forgotten's revelation, of the medicine held by the Tellurians. Skepticism and fear flickered in the eyes of his listeners, the weight of the proposal settling heavily upon them. To raid a Tellurian city was to court death, to challenge a civilization that had emerged from the ashes of war with steel and fire. Yet as Henry looked upon them, pleading not as their leader, but as a father desperate to save his child, a shift occurred. The resolve that had carried them through the wasteland's unforgiving embrace, the understanding that every child of the nomads was a child of their own, began to kindle a shared determination. The dangers of the raid, the specter of Tellurian retribution, paled in comparison to the possibility of reclaiming hope, of wresting life from the jaws of certain despair. One by one, volunteers stepped forward, their faces set, their decision made. 15 souls, driven by a mix of bravery and desperation, rallied to Henry's call. Together they would breach the walls of uncertainty, venturing into the heart of Tellurian might for the chance to save not just Elia, but all those threatened by the shadow of the plague. As the meeting dispersed, the plans set into motion. Henry returned to Elia's side, his resolve hardened like the steel of the weapons they would bear into battle. In the quiet that enveloped the camp, with only the stars to bear witness, a father's love forged the first step towards a perilous journey, one that would test the very limits of their courage, their unity, and their will to survive. Under the ghostly glow of Terran Green's twin moons, Henry Deeds and his band of 15 volunteers congregated in the shadow of a rusted-out hull that had once soared through the stars. The air was thick with anticipation and the undercurrent of fear that accompanies the unknown. These nomads, hardened by the unforgiving landscape and the constant threat of the Freeps, found themselves on the precipice of a mission unlike any they had undertaken before. Henry standing before them, maps and digital relics scavenged from the old world spread out on a makeshift table, laid bare the plan that had been forming in his mind. His voice, though steady, carried the weight of the risk they were about to shoulder. "The Tellurians have what we need," he began, his finger tracing the path they would take across the desolate expanse to the nearest city, a bastion of technology and medicine, but also of peril. The city was known as Viridian Gate, a name that spoke of its once verdant surroundings, now nothing more than a memory etched into the crumbling facades of its buildings. Its walls stood tall and imposing, armed guards patrolling its perimeter with vigilance born of constant threat. Henry detailed their defenses, gathered from whispered rumors and the occasional brash tales of those few who had dared to approach its boundaries, and lived to tell the tale. The strategy was twofold: stealth and speed. They would travel under the cloak of night, utilizing the terrain to mask their approach. Each member of the raiding party was assigned a specific role, from scouts who would lead the way to the experts in tech, who would navigate the city's ancient security systems. The equipment they gathered was a testament to their resourcefulness, from grappling hooks repurposed from industrial machinery to makeshift EMP devices capable of shorting electronic locks. Henry's plan hinged on the element of surprise, and the hope that the Tellurians, for all their might, would not expect a raid from a nomad band daring enough to penetrate the heart of their city. "We strike the clinic first," he instructed, pointing to a structure near the city's edge, its location strategic for their escape. "It's there we'll find the medicine Ilya needs, and possibly a cure for the sickness that plagues our people." As the meeting drew to a close, the gravity of their undertaking settled over them like a shroud. Yet within that silence bloomed a sense of unity, a shared resolve to face the dangers that awaited them for the sake of their loved ones. They were not just nomads, they were fathers, mothers, siblings, and friends, bound by a common thread of hope and desperation. In the hours that followed, the camp was a hive of activity. Weapons were checked and rechecked, supplies gathered, and goodbyes whispered under the starlit sky. Henry spent a long moment beside Ilya, her face serene in sleep, unaware of the journey her father was about to undertake. His promise to her, unspoken but as tangible as the kiss he placed on her forehead, was a vow to return, to bring back the chance for a future. As the first hint of dawn began to bleed into the night, Henry and his volunteers set out, their silhouettes merging with the darkness as they embarked on their desperate quest. The silence of their departure was a testament to their resolve, a silent prayer to the unforgiving gods of Terran Green for success, for survival, and for salvation. The trek into Tellurian territory was a testament to the harshness of Terran Green, a landscape that had long ago forsaken any pretense of mercy. Henry Deeds led his band of nomads with a quiet intensity, each step taking them deeper into the heart of danger, closer to the walls of Viridian Gate. The wasteland stretched out before them, an endless expanse of desolation, broken only by the jagged skeletons of buildings that once promised a future never realized. Stealth was their ally in the vast openness of the wasteland. The team moved under the cloak of night, guided by the dim light of the moons. Henry had charted a course designed to avoid the known patrol routes of the Phoebes, the alien aggressors whose sporadic raids had only added to the chaos of Terran Green's fractured existence. Despite their diminished numbers, an encounter with a Phoebe patrol would spell disaster for Henry's mission. As the hours stretched into days, the constant vigilance began to take its toll. The scarcity of water and the unforgiving terrain sparked the first embers of discord among the group. Tempers flared over dwindling rations, and the oppressive heat of the day forced them into a grueling march through the cold of the night, fraying nerves and testing their resolve. A particularly tense moment came when Mara, one of the scouts, insisted on a detour to avoid what she believed was a Phoebe surveillance drone. Skepticism from Lucas, the group's de facto second-in-command, led to a heated argument that threatened to divide the group. It was Henry's calm authority that quelled the dispute, reminding them of the stakes of their mission and the need for unity. His leadership, firm yet empathetic, reinforced the bonds that held them together, a shared commitment to their cause that was stronger than the sum of their fears and frustrations. The environmental hazards of Terran Green were no less forgiving than its inhabitants. Sandstorms, capable of erasing all sense of direction and burying supplies in moments, were a constant threat. A particularly fierce storm caught them exposed in open terrain, forcing them to huddle under makeshift shelters as the world around them disappeared into a maelstrom of sand and wind. It was a harrowing experience, one that left them battered but unbroken, emerging with a renewed sense of purpose and solidarity. Their journey was also marked by moments of unexpected beauty. Once, as they navigated a particularly desolate stretch, they witnessed a rare bloom of flower, defiant in its fragility, pushing through a crack in the scorched earth. It was a poignant reminder of what they were fighting for, the chance for life to prevail in a land touched by so much death. As Viridian Gate finally came into view, a silhouette against the horizon, the squad paused. The city stood as a fortress in the wasteland, its walls a barrier between them and the salvation they sought. Henry surveyed his team, seeing the weariness etched into their faces, but also the resolve that burned in their eyes. They had faced the wilderness, endured its trials, and emerged united by a common goal. With a nod from Henry, the team resumed their march, the city's looming presence a reminder of the final challenge that lay ahead. They were nomads, a people shaped by the unforgiving landscape of Terran Green, and they would not be deterred. The journey into Tellurian lands had forged them into more than a squad. They were a family, bound by a shared hope for a future that began with the walls of Viridian Gate. As the silhouette of Viridian Gate materialized from the haze of the desert, Henry Deeds and his team found themselves confronted with the daunting reality of their quest. The city, a monolith of survival amidst the desolation of Terran Green, stood as a testament to Tellurian resilience and ingenuity. Its towering walls, reinforced with remnants of old-world technology, promised security to those within and peril to those daring to breach its defenses. The outskirts of the city were a no-man's land, a buffer zone cleared of any cover that might aid potential assailants. Surveillance equipment, some clearly visible and others undoubtedly hidden, dotted the landscape, casting an electronic gaze that left little room for error. Patrols, both on foot and in armored vehicles, traversed the perimeter with a discipline that spoke of the constant threat of invasion, whether from rival factions or the Freebs. Under the cover of a rock outcropping, Henry and his squad observed the city's routines, noting the timing of patrols and the shifts in surveillance. The relentless sun dipped below the horizon, granting them the cover of twilight to begin their operation. It was Mara, their scout, who first identified a potential weakness, a section of the wall where the shadows lay deepest, obscured from the nearest surveillance towers by the remnants of a crumbled building. The plan was simple in concept, yet fraught with risk. Utilizing the darkness as their ally, they would approach the wall under the stealth of night, using grappling hooks to ascend quickly and silently. The gear they had prepared, a mix of salvaged technology and makeshift tools, was distributed with care, each member familiarizing themselves with their role in the operation. Henry emphasized the need for silence and speed. In and out before they know we're there, he instructed, his voice a whisper against the cool night air. Keep to the shadows, move as one. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for those we left behind. As night enveloped the desert, casting its pall over the city, the team made their move. They navigated the no-man's land with a practiced stealth, a ghostly procession moving towards an uncertain fate. The distance to the wall, under the cover of darkness, seemed to stretch on interminably, every rustle of sand and distant clang of the city's inner workings a reminder of the thin line they walked between success and catastrophe. Reaching the base of the wall, the reality of their undertaking set in. The structure loomed above them, a barrier of stone and steel that separated the dying from hope. With practiced efficiency, the grappling hooks were deployed, the silent hiss of the launchers sending them arcing towards the top of the wall. One by one, the team began their ascent, the tension of the ropes a tangible connection to their mission's precarious nature. Henry was the last to climb, his gaze lingering on the expanse they had crossed, the city that lay beyond, and the vast, starlit sky above. It was a moment of reflection, of understanding the magnitude of their undertaking, not just as a raid, but as a testament to the lengths to which they would go to save their own. At the top of the wall, the team regrouped, hidden in the shadow of a parapet. Below them, Viridian Gate sprawled, unaware of the intruders at its gates. For Henry and his squad, the city represented more than just a repository of medicine. It was the embodiment of a world that had once been whole, now fractured yet still clinging to survival. Their mission was clear, their resolve unshaken. As they prepared to descend into the heart of the city, the weight of their quest settled upon them with renewed gravity. They were not merely thieves in the night, they were harbingers of change, warriors fighting for a future where the suffering of their people might find reprieve. The cover of night was a cloak upon Henry Deeds and his squad as they perched atop Viridian Gate's formidable wall, the city sprawling beneath them like a dormant beast. The grappling gear, now reeled in and stowed away, had served its first critical purpose, elevating them from the sands of desperation to the precipice of hope. The guards, mere shadows themselves in the scant moonlight, remained oblivious to the breach that had just occurred under their watch. Henry, with a signal, ushered his team into motion. They were phantoms against the backdrop of the city, each movement calculated to avoid the pools of light cast by the sporadic street lamps. The plan required them to split into smaller units, a tactic designed to mitigate the risk of detection while maximizing their chances of reaching the clinic undetected. Mara led the first group, her familiarity with stealth operations invaluable in navigating the labyrinthine streets towards their target. Lucas took command of the second, his resolve steeling him against the dangers of the night. Henry, with a select few, formed the third group, their path taking them through the less patrolled, but more treacherous, industrial sector of the city. The tension among them was a tangible thing, a thread pulled taut with each step that brought them closer to their goal. The clinic, identified from the stolen blueprints of the city, was situated near the community core, a beacon of modern medicine starkly contrasted against the backdrop of a world fallen into ruin. Communicators, set to the lowest possible volume, allowed the teams to update each other on their progress. The city, for all its apparent calm, was a maze of potential threats: patrolling guards, surveillance drones, and perhaps most dangerous of all, the unpredictable reactions of the citizenry should they stumble upon the raiders. Mara's group was the first to encounter trouble. A patrol, moving silently along their intended route, forced them into a precarious hide, pressed against the cold metal of an abandoned vehicle. The wait, though mere minutes, felt like an eternity, the passing guards a mere whisper away from discovering their presence. Lucas, in contrast, navigated his segment of the city with an uncanny luck, their route seemingly abandoned at this late hour. The emptiness, while a boon to their stealth, cast an eerie pall over their journey, the desolation a stark reminder of the world outside the walls. Henry's path led them through the remnants of industrial might, the factories and warehouses standing as silent sentinels to a bygone era. It was here, amidst the ghosts of productivity, that they encountered their own obstacle: a security checkpoint, unmanned but monitored by cameras. A quick application of an EMP device, a risky but necessary action, rendered the electronic eyes blind, allowing them to slip past undetected. As the teams converged on the clinic, the reality of their mission settled in with renewed weight. The building, modern and well-lit, stood as an island of hope in a sea of despair. Its doors, locked and secured, presented the final barrier to their quest. Henry, arriving with the last group, surveyed the clinic with a critical eye. The plan, from this point forward, was simple: breach, secure, and extract. Yet, as they prepared to enter the clinic, the weight of their actions pressed heavily upon him. They were not just thieves in the night, they were saviors, seeking salvation not just for Henry's daughter, but for all those who had fallen ill to the plague's merciless grip. With a nod from Henry, the teams moved into position, their hearts buoyed by the proximity to their goal and the lives they hoped to save. The night assault, fraught with danger and shadowed by risk, had brought them to the cusp of triumph. Now, all that remained was to claim the prize that lay within the clinic's walls. The stillness of the clinic was a stark contrast to the tension that gripped Henry and his squad as they breached its doors. The entry, executed with a precision born of desperation, was silent, the lock yielding to their tools without protest. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, a preservation of civilization amidst chaos. They moved with purpose, fanning out to secure the perimeter and locate the medicine that promised salvation. The clinic, for all its modernity, was eerily deserted. The late hour and perhaps the fear of raids had left it unmanned, save for the soft, rhythmic beeping of medical equipment that punctuated the silence. It was Lucas who first stumbled upon the room, where the sole occupant of the clinic lay a young girl, no older than Henry's Belia, her brow furrowed with the feverish battle she waged against her own illness. The sight of her, so vulnerable and yet so fiercely alive in her fight to survive, brought Henry's mission into sharp relief. Here, in this room, the abstract became painfully concrete. The medicine they sought to take, stockpiled in cabinets and refrigerated storage units nearby, was not just a resource to be plundered, it was a lifeline, as vital to this girl as it was to Ilya. Henry's heart clenched at the sight, the parallels between this unknown child and his own daughter, drawing a line he had never intended to cross. The dilemma that now faced him was cruel in its simplicity. To take the medicine in its entirety would be to secure Ilya's chance at life, but at the cost of another's. Could he, in good conscience, doom this girl to death, even to save his own flesh and blood? The squad, sensing their leader's hesitation, paused, their mission hanging in the balance. It was Mara who spoke first, her voice a whisper in the dimly lit room. "We can't take it all, Henry. We came here to save lives, not to condemn others." Her words, spoken with a conviction that belied her years, echoed the tumultuous thoughts within Henry's mind. They had set out to be raiders, yes, but not monsters. The line they were about to cross would mark them, indelibly, with a choice whose weight would linger long after their mission was completed. With a heavy heart, Henry made his decision. They would take only what they desperately needed, leaving enough behind to ensure the girl's continued care. It was a compromise, fraught with its own risks and uncertainties, but it was one he could live with. The realization that their survival did not necessitate the sacrifice of others was a sharp, clarifying pain, a reminder of the humanity they still possessed. The squad moved quickly then, gathering the required medicines with a newfound solemnity. The clinic, once a target, had become a reminder of their mission's true cost. As they prepared to leave, Henry took one last look at the girl, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. In her he saw Ilya, and in Ilya he saw the countless others who struggled against the darkness of illness and despair. The night was still as they made their way out of the clinic, the medicine secured and their consciences burdened by the knowledge of the life that hung in the balance. Henry led them back into the shadows of the city, the weight of their heist a tangible presence among them. They had set out to steal a cure but had found, instead, a profound truth about the cost of survival in a world where every life was a battle, and every decision a potential salvation, or a sentence. In the dimly lit streets of Viridian Gate, Henry and his team, laden with the critical medicine, moved with a haste born of necessity. The clinic, now behind them, stood silent, a beacon of both hope and despair. Unbeknownst to them, their exit had triggered a silent alarm, a whisper through the city's security network that called the guardians of the night to action. The tranquility of the night was shattered without warning. Bright floodlights tore through the darkness, bathing the alleyways in stark, unforgiving light. Shouts echoed against the cold, hard surfaces of the city as the guards, clad in the advanced armor of the Tellurian Defense Force, converged on Henry's position. The ambush was swift, the element of surprise wholly on the side of the city's protectors. "Drop your weapons." "You are surrounded," the command, amplified through a loudspeaker, offered no room for misinterpretation. Henry, caught in the floodlight's glare, assessed their situation with a rapid, tactical eye. Escape routes that had seemed viable moments ago were now cut off, the shadows that had been their ally now pushed back by the encroaching light. But surrender was not an option, not with Ilya's life hanging in the balance. "Spread out." Cover and fire. Henry's order, sharp and decisive, broke the momentary paralysis that had gripped his team. The standoff, tense and charged, erupted into chaos as the first shots rang out. The Tellurian guards, trained for such confrontations, responded with disciplined volleys of fire. Their weapons, more advanced than the salvaged firearms of the nomads, spoke of the city's technological superiority. Henry and his squad, however, fought with the desperation of those who had everything to lose. Covering fire from Lucas and Mara allowed part of the team to maneuver into more defensible positions, turning the narrow alleys into a labyrinth of resistance. The firefight, intense and relentless, echoed through the streets, a symphony of defiance and survival. Henry, moving from cover to cover, directed his team with shouts and signals, each movement a calculated risk. The medicine, secured in backpacks, became a beacon for the guards' attention, its importance clear to both sides. Amidst the chaos, a realization struck Henry with the force of a physical blow. Their actions, while born of desperation, had endangered not just their lives but the fragile peace that existed within the city's walls. The guards, in their eyes, were not just defenders of the city but protectors of its people, their families and loved ones who depended on the same medicine they sought to take. The skirmish, as fierce as it was, could not last. The superior firepower and numbers of the Tellurian guards began to tell, their encroachment inexorable. Henry, seeing the futility of continued resistance, made the call that pained him more than any wound. Fall back. Save yourselves. It was a command that went against every instinct, every desire to fight to the bitter end for his daughter's life. But to continue would mean the loss of more than just the mission. It would mean the loss of all they had fought for. The retreat was a scramble, a desperate dash for the shadows that once again promised safety. The team, or what remained of it, dispersed, melting into the night from which they had come. The sounds of the battle faded into the distance, leaving only the harsh breaths of the fleeing and the heavy silence of the city. Henry, alone now, clutched the bag of medicine to his chest as if it were a lifeline. The night around him felt heavier, the weight of their failed mission a tangible presence in the dark. The skirmish had escalated beyond their control, a confrontation that had cost them dearly. But even in the face of such loss, the flicker of hope that had driven them to this point refused to be extinguished. Henry knew the battle for his daughter's life was far from over, and the resolve that had carried him this far steeled him for the challenges that lay ahead. In the shadowed alleyways of Viridian Gate, the remnants of Henry Deed's squad faced the grim reality of their situation. The city, once a silent giant in the night, had awakened, its guardians closing in with a relentless determination. The echoes of gunfire had dwindled, replaced by the heavier sound of approaching footsteps. Henry, his back against the cold, unyielding surface of a building, clutched the precious bag of medicine to his chest. Around him, the scattered members of his team lay in various states of reprieve or peril, the toll of their desperate mission etched in stark relief against the night. The Tellurian guards, no longer shadows but avatars of the city's will, advanced with a methodical precision. Their orders were clear: recover the stolen property and neutralize the threat. Henry, understanding the futility of further flight, prepared for his last stand. The knowledge that his actions might have doomed his companions weighed heavily on him, a burden that was his alone to bear. One by one, his remaining squad members were found and subdued, their desperate cries a harrowing testament to the night's toll. Lucas, always the stalwart, fell defending a narrow passageway, his last act a defiant roar against the encroaching silence. Mara, the scout whose keen eyes had led them this far, was cornered and captured, her fate sealed by the city's unforgiving justice. Henry watched, his heart a battlefield of grief and resolve, as his friends, his family of the road, were taken from him. The realization that he was the last remaining beacon of their mission, the sole carrier of the hope they had all fought for, lent him a grim strength. With a steadying breath, he stepped from the shadows, his presence a challenge to the forces that sought to end their quest. The confrontation was brief but fierce. Henry, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. Each shot he fired was a testament to his daughter's memory, to the promise he had made her. The guards, in their relentless advance, showed no quarter, their weapons speaking the final language of the city's will. In the end, Henry Deeds fell not with a whisper but a shout, his voice echoing through the alleyways of Viridian Gate, a defiance that would linger long after his last breath. The bag of medicine, secured against all odds, lay beside him, a Pyrrhic victory in the shadow of loss. The tragedy of Henry's squad, of their mission born of desperation, and ended in sacrifice, was a somber melody played out under the uncaring stars. The city, having reclaimed its stolen treasure, turned inward once more, its streets silent witnesses to the cost of survival in a world divided by walls and war. But even in the darkness of that moment, in the fall of those who had dared to challenge the night, a spark remained. The medicine, though recovered by the city's guardians, carried with it a story, a plea for understanding and compassion in a world too often bereft of both. Henry's last stand, though ending in his death, was not in vain. The seeds of change, watered by the blood of those who had fallen, began to take root in the hearts of those who witnessed, and in those who would hear the tale in the days to come. In the silence that followed the battle, Viridian Gate stood not as a victor but as a monument to the complex tapestry of survival, to the choices that defined them, and to the hope that, even in the darkest of nights, refused to be extinguished. As dawn broke over Viridian Gate, casting a soft light on the streets that had been the stage of a desperate struggle hours before. The city began to awaken to the aftermath of the night's events. The Tellurian authorities, having secured the clinic and the surrounding areas, found themselves not only with the recovered medicine but also with the bodies of the raiders, a grim testament to the night's violence. Among the fallen was Henry Deeds, his lifeless form lying in quiet defiance, the bag of medicine still clutched in his grasp. The discovery of his identity and the realization of his mission's nature sent ripples through the city's leadership. The narrative of the raid, once thought to be a simple act of theft, transformed as the details of Henry's final stand and his moral quandary came to light. The Tellurian media, always hungry for stories, seized upon the tale of the nomad raiders, particularly focusing on Henry's poignant dilemma, his decision to leave medicine for the sickly girl he found within the clinic. This act of compassion, juxtaposed against the backdrop of his violent end, sparked a citywide conversation about the nature of survival, the desperation of those living beyond the city's walls, and the moral obligations of those within. In cafes, marketplaces, and the privacy of homes, residents of Viridian Gate found themselves confronted with the harsh realities of life outside their fortified sanctuary. The plight of the nomads, so starkly illustrated by Henry's sacrifice, challenged long-held beliefs about the outsiders who roamed the wastelands. The discussion broadened to include the city's policies on medical aid, with many questioning the ethics of hoarding resources in a world where such scarcity could drive a man to risk everything for the chance to save his child. The authorities, initially defensive, found themselves at the center of a burgeoning debate. The actions of Henry and his squad, particularly their decision to spare part of the medicine for the clinic's patient, forced a re-evaluation of the city's stance on aid and its responsibilities to the wider community of Terran Green. The city council, under increasing public pressure, began to consider proposals for outreach and support to the nomads and other groups living in the shadow of the city's walls. Amidst the political and social upheaval, a memorial for Henry and his team emerged spontaneously near the clinic, a collection of flowers, notes, and medical supplies. It became a symbol of the city's awakening conscience, a place where citizens could express their grief, gratitude, and newfound solidarity with those they had once considered only as threats. The story of the raid, Henry's final act, and his moral choice circulated among the Tellurians, becoming a catalyst for change. In the tragedy of his fall, a bridge was built, a connection between two worlds that had long viewed each other with suspicion and fear. Henry Deeds, a name that would have been forgotten in the annals of the city's history, became synonymous with the possibility of understanding, of compassion in the face of desperation. The aftermath of the night's events unfolded not just in the physical cleaning of the streets or the political debates that raged in the council's halls, but in the hearts of the city's residents. They grappled with the implications of the raid, the depths of despair that could drive a father to such lengths, and the realization that the walls which protected them also served to isolate them from the shared struggles of humanity on Terran Green. In the reflection that followed the confrontation, Viridian Gate found itself at a crossroads, poised between the comfort of isolation and the uncertain promise of community. In the weeks following the raid on Viridian Gate, the city found itself in the midst of an unprecedented shift. The story of Henry Deeds, once a nameless raider, now a symbol of the desperation that existed just beyond the city's walls, had sparked a movement within the heart of Tellurian society. A faction of citizens, touched by the narrative of a father's sacrifice and the moral fortitude it unveiled, began to advocate for a new approach to the world outside their fortress of solitude. This group, comprised of individuals from all walks of life, doctors, academics, laborers, and even a few members of the city council, saw in Henry's story a call to action. They rallied under the banner of compassion, pushing for a policy that would extend medical aid to the nomads and other tribes wandering the desolate expanses of Terran Green. Their proposal, a medical aid pact, was a testament to the changing tides of perception, a daring attempt to heal not just the physical wounds of their neighbors, but the rifts that had long divided them. Debates raged within the halls of governance, the idea of extending a hand to those once considered enemies a contentious point. Yet, the momentum of compassion, once set in motion, proved difficult to stall. Stories similar to Henry's, of families torn apart by sickness, and the unyielding cruelty of the wasteland, found their way into the public consciousness, fueling the push for change. In a landmark decision, swayed by the voices of the people and the undeniable logic of shared humanity, the City Council approved the Medical Aid Pact. Teams of volunteers, medical professionals, and peacekeepers were organized, their mission to venture beyond the walls and offer assistance to those in need, to sow the seeds of trust in the barren soil of Terran Green. The closure of Henry's story came on a day much like any other in the wasteland, under the vast expanse of a sky that bore witness to both the cruelty and kindness of the world below. A convoy bearing the flag of Viridian Gate made its way to the nomad camp where Elia, Henry's daughter, awaited a fate once deemed inevitable. The Tellurians, once distant figures of authority and fear, approached not as conquerors but as allies, their hands extended in peace. Among them was a young envoy, a doctor who had been moved by the story of Henry's sacrifice. It was she who knelt before Elia, offering not just the vial of medicine that would save her life, but a promise of a future where such acts of desperation would no longer be necessary. The exchange, simple yet profound, was a testament to the power of empathy, a bridge built over the chasm of misunderstanding and strife. Elia's recovery, swift under the care of her new allies, became a symbol of hope for both the nomads and the Tellurians. Her life, saved by the medicine her father had died to procure, and preserved by the compassion of those once considered enemies, embodied the potential for unity in a divided world. The legacy of Henry deeds, a legacy of compassion, resonated beyond the borders of Viridian Gate, echoing across the wastelands of Terran Green. It was a reminder that even in a world scarred by conflict and survival, there existed the possibility for understanding, for healing, and for a shared path forward. In the aftermath of tragedy, the people of Terran Green found not just closure but a new beginning, a small but significant step toward bridging the divisions that had long defined their existence. Did you enjoy this story? Be sure to subscribe and leave it a like. It helps the channel grow, and that will help us attract more talent to write for us.